welcome to Dying to Live.
Aloha. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here today. I'm really excited to talk to you because um, we come into death and grief work from a little bit of the same umbrella. And I say that loosely because we both have familial death experiences that were, transformative for us. And so I would love to hear a little bit about that for you and kind of how you got to the spot that you're at now.
Oh, okay. I'd be happy to talk about that. I have had two husbands die, and I never thought that would happen. When you get married, you think you're going to just stay married. And it did happen, and it was different both times. I've had lots of other deaths in my life too, my parents, my sister, lots of friends and relatives. It seems like I've had a lot of opportunities to grieve in my life. And I learned a lot mostly when my husbands died. And each experience was entirely different. And through the most recent husband who died, Ron, I learned a lot while we were together about living in the moment.
Mm.
And it really changed the whole grieving process for me. And I'm a writer. I've taught writing at the university level for many years, still do online. And I it turned to writing when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do, because we'd moved to Maui just 2 years before he died, because he had lived here a long time before I met him. And that's where he wanted to come when he realized what his health situation was. And so we just left everything that I knew. I'd never lived any place but California before. So it was a pretty drastic change for me. But by doing things in the moment, everything worked out just beautifully, actually.
Mm.
And after he died, I started writing mostly to myself, journaling, doing different things in my journal. Was very helpful for me to be working through things. But I had this question about, okay, now what's my purpose? Because everything had really shifted for me drastically. So I kept asking myself that and what I wanted to do. And I discovered that I like to teach other people different ways of writing that could help them deal with their loss. And so I didn't really know anybody here in Maui yet. So I had a few close friends, but none of them were dealing with loss. So I created a meetup group and invited people over to my house, and they showed up. And it was amazing. we we got together regularly, and they wanted to meet more often, so we moved it up so we were meeting more often. And we really had a great group going where we would write, and then we talk about what we wrote until the pandemic.
Mm.
And then I switched things to online, and I still do. Not all that group transitioned to online, because they wanted to do the face to face and write with a pen sort of writing.
Mhm.
um, but I do every Saturday morning. Well, it's morning for me here in Maui. It's later in the rest of the country. Um, but we write, and then it's about an hour session. We'll write, and then we talk about what we discovered in the writing, and we have a different topic every time, and they really love it. And we've all learned a lot through that process, and I've enjoyed that a lot.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's really beautiful. And to have a set practice like that too keeps you engaged with it. I love that. You mentioned at the beginning that with all the death in your life, you learn the most about grief and living with grief and living through grief with the deaths of your husbands. And I wonder, was that because of the type of relationship that it was, or why was that?
Well, I think that because we were living together at the time in both situations, because although I'd grown up with my parents in my parents' house, we weren't still living together when each of them died. And it makes a big difference if the person is part of your daily routine, your everyday. It's really different than it is if you're even really good friends and you may talk every day and see each other often. It's not quite the same. And I've had people die in all those situations, but the ones that were the most challenging to work my way through were my two husbands.
Yeah. And when you started writing, when you went to your journal and you started writing, and your question was, what is my purpose? What did you find there?
Well, it wasn't real obvious to start out with, so I just kept writing and asking the question in different ways, and then things would come up. And one of the things that happened was a dear friend of ours, my Ron and my friends, family friends, um, the guy was much younger than Ron, and he called Ron Dad, so they were very close. And he just dropped dead one night.
Oh.
And he had two teenage daughters and a wife. And I was so concerned for his wife because, in both cases with me, I knew what was coming. And I had been able to do some preparation work and been able to have an idea of what was going on. But she was blindsided and not prepared at all. So I sat down right away and wrote to her because of my writing. But I wrote to her all the things that I could think of that she did need to be concerned with at that moment, and the things that she didn't need to be concerned with at that moment. And she told me that that helped her so much, and that nobody else had talked to her about those things. So I thought, I've got to do more than this. So I decided I was going to write her a card every year, not every year, every week for a year. So it'd be
Mm.
52 cards. And I thought that was a really good idea, but I thought 52 is a lot. So I better try to figure out what I'm going to say before I start this and can't finish it. And I was able to do it. And just in a 24-hour period, I wrote all 52 things. And they kind of took you through that first year, and all on each one on a different subject.
Mm.
And when I finished that as a writer, I said, I have an outline. And I think I'm supposed to write a book on this. So I got an agent and a publisher, and the book came out in January.
Oh, I love that. And I see, for those of us who are listening and not watching at this moment, I see the book behind you, but tell everybody what the title is.
It's Loving and Living Your Way Through Grief. And I can't even recite the subtitle because the publisher came up with it and it's very long. But the subtitle is A Comprehensive Guide to Reclaiming and Cultivating Joy and Carrying On in the Face of Loss.
Oh my goodness. And at the immediate onset of loss, I think that the whole idea of joy just feels so out of reach. But I love what you said a minute ago about helping your friend understand what it is that she could focus on and what she could let go in the throes of those initial moments, because we're not taught that. And we do tend, as humans, to be programmed to just go through life kind of as normal, but the simplification process in that time frame is super helpful, just helping us, get through it. So what were some of the things that you told her, she really didn't need to worry about in that time?
Well, I told her what she did need to worry about was self care, because
Mm.
that's usually one of the first things that drops when somebody is dealing with loss. They just don't think about themselves. They either eat too much or not enough, and they tend to sit or lie down, and that's it. Not
Yeah.
even walk around the house, because it's just too much to concentrate on movement. Just doing things.
Mm.
It's kind of all you can do sometimes, to just sit there, and that's
Mhm.
okay. If that's what you need to do, it's okay, and you don't need to beat yourself up about that. And if you want to eat ice cream every day, that really is okay too, because you're not going to do it forever. It really does get old after not too long. I know from experience, but it at the time it served its purpose of comfort for me. And I ended up actually losing a lot of weight, so the ice cream didn't hurt me. But um, those were the kind of things. The things that she didn't need to worry about were people that were seeking her out to comfort them because of the loss.
Oh yeah, I've experienced that too. That is really hard and such a unnecessary thing to carry when you're already just trying to survive and carrying that much grief for yourself.
Yeah, sometimes you feel like all you can do is breathe, and you can't believe somebody's asking you the questions they're asking. And if that happens, then you can say, I just can't talk about that right now. Maybe later. And you don't have to answer the questions. You don't have to do what they want you to do at that time. Um, it essentially, even if you love them dearly, essentially whatever they're asking you about is their problem, and you need to, at that moment, take care of you and your problem. You don't have to solve things for other people.
That's good life advice in general.
That's true.
But yeah, especially during that time, that's really a great thought to reinforce for people is, remember that you can enforce your boundaries and whatever feels good to you in those moments
Yeah.
be doing.
And another thing that happens is people say all the time, just let me know what I can do for you.
Right.
Well, at
You
that
don't have the
moment,
capacity to tell
yeah,
them.
you really don't. Just do it for the person who's grieving, whatever it is. Like if you're thinking of bringing a casserole, bring a casserole. But I also recommend if it's somebody who is suddenly alone to not bring a big casserole to them. You can make the casserole, but bring them one serving and wrap the rest of it up in individual size freezer wrapping so they can stick it in the freezer. And so it's not something that they have to think about, something that they have to do at that point. And if you approach everything with that kind of an idea, that don't make the griever have to work for whatever it is that you are doing for them.
Right.
And then
And
go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, well, and think about too, the number of other people that might be bringing casseroles, right? And
Hmm.
if there's some other way that you could be of assistance, whether it's, cleaning their bathroom because you understand they probably haven't done that in 2 weeks or
Yes.
whatever it is.
Yeah, that's really important. And I grew up in a small town, and with my mom had lots of siblings, and my dad had a couple, and so we had lots of family gatherings and lots of funerals, and we always had a huge thing of people eating afterwards, people bringing food, and then people would bring casseroles. In neither one of my husband's death did anybody bring me a casserole or anything to eat. And I was so surprised because I thought, but when somebody dies, you take them food. And nobody brought me food, and I didn't feel like shopping. So that was kind of a challenge for me.
Mm.
That's where I started losing weight, because if there was something that appealed to me in the house, one of my go-tos was a spoon and a jar of peanut butter. Because I didn't have to prepare anything. It was protein, it was good for me, and I could have a spoonful, and that kind of squelched the hunger so that I could continue on.
Yeah. I think it's hard too, going about those, for people to think about not underestimating the difficulty of those kind of everyday tasks like food shopping. I remember walking into the grocery store and in the throes of deep, deep grief and, really not being able to complete the task because I would look around and see all of these people that were just going about their life as if everything was
How
fine.
could they do that?
How could they do that? Yes.
I have actually walked out of a grocery store, left what I had picked up so far in my cart, and just left the cart there with the food in it and left, because I just I couldn't handle it.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think about what do you think about the so-called stages of grief and how those play out in our life?
That's a really interesting question, because I really don't believe there are stages of grief. For one thing, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote a book in the early 70s called On Death and Dying. And in
Mhm.
there, she talks about the 5 stages of dying. And somehow society just took those stages on as the stages of grief.
Mhm.
And they don't really correspond. And so people want something to hold on to. They want some sort of a framework to say, okay, what do I have to do, and then this will be over. And so they reach for something like that. But they might only experience two of those things that are traditionally um, considered stages, or they might experience other things. When I was doing research for my book, I saw everything from 3 stages of grief to 9 stages of grief. And they were all different. The basic 5 were the ones that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross came up with, but everybody else had a different opinion about it. So your grief is your grief, and you need to experience what you experience and what happens with you, and not compare yourself to anybody else or compare yourself to any list.
Hmm.
You just take care of your own self.
And not also burden yourself with a timeline,
That's
because
right. You don't want to fail the test, so to speak. Because then you might have a really hard time forgiving yourself, and then you have a really hard time doing the next thing. So if you think there are things you're supposed to do, that can do more damage than do good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I know from my research that you are a spiritual person. And I wonder how spirituality and having a spiritual practice plays into all of your experiences with death and dying and grief, or if it does.
Oh, I think it does. I think when you're basically a spiritual person, that's just who you are, and everything that you do is has something to do with that. And my view on spirituality is that we're all part of the same great big whole, and that it's we're all interconnected, and as such, we're all grieving and we're all happy and we're all these different things. And if you can boil that down to living just in the moment, then that moment's always going to be okay. And I think that living in the moment to me is what really came to me through spirituality, that I could whatever was happening, I could survive a moment, and I could deal with a moment, and then when the next moment was there, I could deal with that moment at that time. And breaking it down like that was so much easier. And I didn't feel that way after Jacques died, because we had been, I guess, agnostic.
Hmm.
He had been raised Catholic and had was very active in the church, really, really active. And then he went to college and was um, English English and writing professor, but he saw that he was doing everything from a philosophical perspective. So he went back and got another degree in philosophy. And as he did that, he found out that what he really in his heart believed didn't have anything to do with Catholicism. So he ended up leaving the church, which caused all kinds of problems in his family. And this was before I knew him. So when I met him, he no longer was affiliated in any way with religion. And I'd had some tough goes with religion, so to speak, that I was comfortable with being with him with that feeling. I was fine with that. But when I got together with Ron, and he was a very spiritual person, he was always not intentionally teaching me, but he lived an example that I could see that I liked the results of the way that he lived, like the living in the moment,
Hmm.
and that everything's love, to just base everything on love, and the importance of forgiveness, and that there's really basically two emotions, love and fear. And I really like that, because I realized that I've been carrying a lot of fear around in my life. And as I examined each one of the things that I was fearful about, I thought, this is history. This
Hmm.
doesn't have anything to do with who I am today or what I'm doing now. And the more of that I relieved, or not relieved, released, the more that I released, the more comfortable I became with myself, and realized that I was living more and more in love. So now everything I do is with love. And I really don't feel that I feel fear anything anymore, because you can just look at it in perspective, whatever it is, whatever the experience is. And as long as you face it with love, it feels a lot better for you, and it also kind of ripples out from you around you, so that what you attract has to do with love.
Your your thoughts on living in the moment. So when I have gone through difficult things, I come back to that as a mantra and really feel into, okay, in this moment, I'm okay. In this moment, I can feel the couch beneath me. I have a roof over my head, all the things that help give me evidence in
Mhm.
that moment that I'm okay. And that really does help build that muscle, where fear becomes more of a friend, more familiar, I'm able to sit with it longer. But it really is a practice to consciously look at each moment and understand that you're fine in this moment.
Yes.
But it really is kind of a miracle worker of a practice.
It really is. I can give you an example of fear that changed my whole perspective on fear. I had, from as early as I can remember, a terror of heights. I just always felt like I was kind of going over the edge. Even with walking and stepping, it was very frightening for me, and it kind of held me back from things because it wasn't comfortable to move forward because I was always afraid I was going to be going over the edge. Well, I decided at one point that I wanted to have Lasik surgery that would, so I wouldn't have to wear glasses anymore. So I went in and had the surgery, and they do it, you're conscious, they just kind of numb your eyes. And so when they were finished and I stood up after the surgery, I said, that's where the floor is supposed to be. My astigmatism had been so bad that I didn't know that anybody else wasn't seeing and feeling the same thing I was, because it's the only perspective that I ever had.
Mm.
And when I could release something that wasn't true, that wasn't real, I truly let go of that fear. And I thought, if that happened in this situation, then what else am I fearing that isn't real and that I can let go?
Oh, that's so powerful. I love that. such such a visceral way to experience that too. Something, so physically human that you
Mhm.
then translated. That's amazing. It sounds like you had a bit of a runway with Ron's death. You understood what was happening and coming. And I wonder how you might have navigated that together with him, and what his experience was as well.
Well, that provides a very interesting context with me. Both my husbands had, not when I met them, not that I knew of, had the same issue.
Oh,
And I had no idea that the second time I was getting into the same situation again. But they each had congestive heart failure, which led to kidney failure, which led to dialysis.
oh my gosh.
So, and they both had kind of a gradual building up to starting to have difficulty with it, slowing down, having it, not being able to walk as far, having difficulty breathing, that sort of thing. But wasn't really stopping them from doing what they were doing in their lives until it reached a certain point for each of them that was about 2 years out from their death for each of them.
Wow.
So, and Jacques, as a philosophy professor, had actually become a bioethicist, which he was considering the ethics of living and dying, and that's what he taught. And he taught a required course for all nurses at the college where he was. It got to be the point that that was like the main course he took, because so many people were going through the nursing program, where they considered everything about living and dying and anything related to that. So it really surprised me when one day he said to me, am I going to get better? Because I thought, you're a brilliant man. You can see what's happened to your body. You can see all the hospitalizations you've had, all the doctor's appointments you've had. But I realized at that point that he was doing all that because he, someplace in the back of his mind, had this idea that doctors would heal him, that he would get better if he followed the medical advice and took the medication or had the surgery or whatever it was. And it didn't dawn on him till right then and I told him no when he asked me if he was going to get better, because we also were truthful with each other. I couldn't say anything else.
Mhm.
And he died about an hour later. It was like once he realized that it was just too painful and too hard to keep going on with what he was going on with, which was at that point in his life really miserable. So that was a totally different thing than happened with Ron, where with Ron's perspective on living in the moment, we spent like all of our time together, and we did essentially whatever we wanted to do. He was a brilliant man. He had three master's degrees in different fields and worked in all of them, doing phenomenal things in the world. He just was a really amazing person. And somebody gave him, he died in early August and his birthday was June 20th. And somebody gave him a book for his birthday that was about the last year of Martin Luther King. And he had been wanting to read it. He really wanted to read it. And he read lots of books in his life, but he picked it up and tried to read it. And he realized that his eyes weren't functioning in a way that he was going to be able to read the book.
Mm.
And he told me that. So I just took it out of his hand and I read the whole book to him.
Mm.
And it took a few days and it was a beautiful experience that he didn't have any of this like macho, I'm gonna, yeah, or the feel sorry for me because I can't read this book and I wanted to know what it was. There was nothing. It was just seamless, that he still got to get the content of the book. We spent the time together. It was a beautiful experience. And so our whole perspective, it wasn't, he knew he wasn't going to the doctor to get better, because he would question any doctor that he had anything to do with. And he said, "Well, what can you do? What are the options?" And he would consider all the options. And he says, "Well, it doesn't look like any of those are going to work. Is that right?" And he said, "Well, they doctors want to heal too, and so they want to tell you that they can make you better." But he had real honest conversations with him, so he was very realistic about what was going on. And when it came right down to it, about a week before he died, he said, "Well, it's time for hospice."
Mm.
And I said, "Okay." And we made the arrangements, and one of the first things he did was think about every single person that he needed to say goodbye to.
Mm.
And we're here on Maui, so we called people on the mainland, and a whole bunch of them came over. We had a party for a week. It was amazing. Any food he wanted to eat, people came over and sang for him. They danced for him. They played music for him. They read to him. They talked to him. They did all these things, but he talked to every single person that he wanted to. The people that couldn't come, fortunately, there was FaceTime, and he got to talk to him. We tracked people down. He had an adopted daughter. Well, she was still his adopted daughter, but they hadn't spent much time together after she got to be an adult. But we tracked her down. I think she was in Greece with her husband and her two stepchildren. And I told her what was going on and that he wanted to talk to her. They were just there on a vacation. And so she said, "Well, let me call you back in about 15 minutes. I want to get everybody together because I want my children to get to see this man that was such an incredible influence on my life."
Mm.
And so he got to not only talk to her, who he hadn't talked to in a long time, but to get to meet her husband and to talk to her stepchildren. And it was really beautiful. And they all ended up being able to come to the service that we had. We had a service in California too, since we'd only been away from there for 2 years. And I got to meet him and talk to him, and it was really neat. But he talked to people that he told me about that he hadn't talked to in years. But he said, "I want to talk to him one last time," and we tracked down phone numbers. It was like this detective work all week long, trying to make sure that he got to talk to everybody that he wanted to. And once he realized he was complete with that, then he was okay to just kind of let his body do what his body was doing and just relaxing and ultimately just going to sleep, and then the next day not waking up.
Oh my gosh. So to me, that is such a beautiful death.
It was
And
amazing.
and because you two had the relationship that you had and you you lived in truth, and you were lucky enough to have doctors that would also speak some truth, because oftentimes that's not the case. Folks are just trained a certain way, and I think that's changing, um but oftentimes we don't get told what's really happening when that could be the most helpful thing. And then you had your in the moment practice and your spirituality, and you were able to really savor those last days together, and he got everything he needed, it sounded like, in that
Hmm.
moment. That is, I'm going to tear up. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, it it was amazing. It was such a contrast to all I learned from before about don't um, don't hesitate to ask questions,
Mhm.
because I know Jacques wasn't, he didn't want to know the answer if it wasn't that he was going to get better. So he didn't, as brilliant as he was, he wouldn't ask the doctors those questions, and the doctors didn't volunteer the information.
Mhm.
But being in a situation with Ron where he was curious and he wanted to know the truth, because that's what he lived in, was truth. And it made everything so much easier, kind of ease and grace for the whole process. I can't tell you I wasn't sad and then I didn't cry, and I still grieved considerably, and I still grieve. Both of those men are in my heart and will be forever.
Mhm.
And people say, well, how can you love two husbands? And I said, well, how many kids do you have? you know, chances are if you've got more than one kid, you love each one of them.
For
And
sure.
it's the same sort of thing. I didn't have the two husbands at the same time, but when I was married to them, that was our life.
Mm.
And so that's the answer to another question that people ask me all the time, was how long do you grieve? Well, I feel like you grieve forever. It just changes, because to me, grief is love. And I know, and the other thing I focus on right now a lot is on happiness, because I know that neither one of them, both of them were happy people, and neither one of them would be happy with me if I sat around and was sad for the rest of my life. They would expect me to be able to smile and have a good life.
Mhm. And what a gift to have loved two people in that way so far in your life. Um, if we could only be so lucky to have so much love.
Yes.
I really love the saying. I don't know whose it is, but grief is love with no place to go.
Hmm.
That certainly resonates for me, and I agree with you. I think it's always with you, and it just changes form, and you sit with it differently over time. And I'm really curious too about writing and the way that you help facilitate kind of grief processing for others through writing, and the significance that writing has as a vehicle for helping us process and hold grief.
I have found that when you don't write something down, it can bounce around in your head for the rest of your life. But if you go through the process of actually writing it down, then you can look at it and see what's true and what's not true, what you need to deal with, what you don't need to deal with. And there's lots of ways that you can do that. Uh, when after Jacques died, somebody suggested that I write down a list of things that I was grateful for, and I almost said, "Excuse me, my husband died, and you think I'm grateful for anything here?" I didn't say that, but that's definitely what I thought. But I had other people start saying that to me. You need to write down what you're grateful for. And I thought, if I'm hearing it from more than one source, I need to at least try and pay attention. Well, I found once I started writing a gratitude list, that the
Mhm.
list got longer and longer and longer. I found that if I was standing in line someplace, I'd dig a receipt out of my purse that I could write on the back of, because I didn't want to forget that grateful thing that I had that I wanted to hold on to. And the more gratitude I expressed, it became longer. It wasn't just like I'm grateful that the sky's so pretty and blue here today, like it is on Hawaii, because I didn't always get to experience that in California, and I really love to experience the blue skies. But I just didn't say I'm grateful that the sky is blue. I could go on and write about it. So anything that I write down that I'm grateful, I include why I'm grateful. And the more I do that, the better I feel. I can't help but feel better. And it really, that was the point after Shock died when I was turning a corner by doing that.
Hmm.
And then one of the exercises that I do a lot with people when we're working on writing for grief is to write a letter to their loved one.
Hmm.
And because it most people now with Shock it wasn't that way. I'm with Ron it wasn't that way for me because we actually said everything we wanted to say to each other. But especially in cases with sudden death, you might not have had that opportunity. And you really want, there's like one last thing you wanted to say or something you wanted to tell them that you never got around to or something. And if you write these letters from the heart, a really deep letter from the heart, and then when you get finished with it, you start another letter that is written to you from the person that you just wrote to.
Ooh.
And what they discover in doing that exercise is profound. Yeah, I've seen it totally change the perspective of the grieving person by doing that. And I do it on times like I'll do it on anniversaries, birthdays, Valentine's Day, Thanksgiving was all with both of them was our favorite holiday. Things like that. I generally write letters and see what they have to say. And I just recently had an experience because I'm doing something new that I'm really excited about. And I thought, I'm not sure that this is just something that I would really like, or if it's something that the people that I want to do it for are going to respond to. So I decided to do a pilot program first. And I pulled together people from all different aspects of my life and said, what I want to do is have a weekly meeting with people who are dealing with grief or loss and loss. And at that meeting, we'll do a writing practice,
Hmm.
and we'll talk about whatever we wrote. And we will do a happiness practice because I'm also a certified Happy for No Reason trainer through Marcy Shimoff's program. And I really believe that happiness is an essential part of living in general, and especially in grief. And so we did this pilot program where we talked about it first. I did on another day did a sample. This is what it would be like if you came to it, and then we had another one at the end where we talked about is this something that I should go forward with, and different questions that we had about it. And at the end of it, one of the participants who I love dearly, she'd done lots of writing classes with me, she just out of the blue spoke up and said, this is an idea whose time has come, and we all support you in this. It's going to happen, and it is going to be such a gift and a blessing to so many people. And it was really profound, and I was really glad that I had recorded the session so that I could save that spot. Well, 2 days later, this person died, and you know, it was really kind of tough.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, I'm going to write a letter to Ron and talk to him about it. And I didn't get too far into the letter with saying, I really wish that you could tell me what you think about the situation. Am I doing the right thing? Did what she said, is this what's real? And it's loud and clear, and it couldn't have been more clear to me. I heard him say, I already told you on Sunday.
Oh.
That was him speaking through her with the
Mm.
answer to that question.
And of course it was. Of course.
Hmm.
Oh.
So all I can say is writing works. All these different things, and I've got lots of different ways to do it. The Saturday morning group that I've been doing for a long time now, that was kind of a result of the on-ground group that we used to have. We started doing this with the people who would like to do there. It's generally a small group. It can be different every time. We've got kind of core people, but sometimes they can come and sometimes they can't. So the group kind of shifts around. And I've I told them, I don't make a secret about it, that I usually get the topic that we're going to write on that morning, a couple of hours before we do it, because that's just what happens. I could plan earlier in the week, this is what we're going to do it, and then not too long before we actually start the program, I know exactly what the people that are going to show up that day need to write about that day. And it's different every time. Every week we come up with something different to write about. And they're always saying things like, I didn't realize that that was affecting me, and that it's something I need to look at, and it's something that I can deal with, and it's something I can release, or it's somebody I need to forgive, or whatever it is related to the topic that we're talking about. And it's pretty
Wow.
amazing. It really, really works.
And how amazing too that you're a guide for them that can feel into whatever wants to come up in the moment, and then provide the container for them to experience that. I think
Yes.
it's really profound too, um, that you dare to couple, grief and loss with happiness
Happiness.
work, right? How
Yes.
what a transformational idea that I echo that person's words is so needed right now. We can hold both at the same time. And in fact, we need both, especially right now. So yeah, I champion whatever it is that you are creating for this
That's
and
great.
do it.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to start our weekly meetings in a couple of weeks. And actually, this group, the pilot group that had been meeting with us on the last day, we were talking about how much should we charge for this program, and we were all kind of hemming and hawing around about it. And finally, somebody said, "What we need to do is create a nonprofit foundation so that we can support this, so that the people who come to it knows that there's value to it, because it does cost to do things,
For sure.
and so they know that there is a monetary value to them, but this is a special gift that these people believe in so strongly that they're willing to work to support it, so you can come without cost."
Hmm.
And that kind of blew me away too, that they had
Yeah,
decided to do that.
that's beautiful. Wow. Well, this is probably a really good time to let people know all the places that they can find you, and how they can work with you, and where to find your book.
Okay. Well, the name of my book is Loving and Living Your Way Through Grief, and things kind of spin off from that. Like, my email address is Emily at lovingandlivingyourwaythroughgrief.com. And my webpage is lovingandlivingyourwaythroughgrief.com. So you can remember all those things. And on my webpage, there's things about how you can contact me. But I'm just in the process of putting things on there about the Grief and Happiness Alliance is the name of
Mm.
the program that we're creating. And so you can look for that, and you'll be able to sign up for that there. Um, so there all those. I also do speaking. If you hear of a speaking opportunity that is the kind of thing that I could help people with, I'm grateful to be able to do that.
That's
And
wonderful.
yeah,
Well,
it's
we'll,
really neat.
we'll put all those links too in the show notes. And I saw as well, I digested a little bit of your blog on your site, and there's some really wonderful, quick digestive bits and pieces there for people as well, to even just get a taste and see what you're all about, and how you help guide people, through this process. So I'm so grateful to have you on. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for allowing me this opportunity. I just love to talk to people about this, and hopefully have them smile and do something positive for themselves to help them deal with what they're going